As I mentioned in a previous review, I am a huge Konami addict. Such is the case of one of its ever-adored franchises, starring two ragtag commandos pitting themselves against the mysterious terrorist organization under extraterrestrial rule, not to mention sporting looks inspired by famed 80s action characters / stars. I'm of course talking about the fast-paced run-and-gun series known as Contra, with Bill Mad Dog Riser and Lance Scorpion Bean. Given that I've beaten the game and its follow-ups hundreds of times, then again haven't we all, it's about time I've provided my honest thoughts on them. First and foremost, let's dive into the original Contra, released in '88, first released in the arcades in '87. Chalk it up to the first installment in the franchise, with its rapid-fast, groundbreaking gameplay, a normal if somewhat unforgiving level of difficulty, the icing on the cake two-player co-op, and a wide if rather limited arsenal of weapons and power-ups. How could one go wrong from here? The basic gameplay aspect involved blasting down countless enemies, machines, and artillery while surviving through vast, disaster-infused, war-enriched environments, complete with two pseudo-3D first-person base stages. If you touch so much as a single enemy, projectile, and or trap, your ass is brown bread. Brown fucking bread. Thus convincing you to keep fighting your way to well-deserved victory, hence the auto-revival. Now, despite not having any plotline in the American release, the Japanese Famicom release just so happens to possess one, given the extra graphical chips with which it's been equipped. The year is 2631 AD, and a meteorite has hit the oceans off the coast of Garuga, New Zealand, according to local reports. 2 years later, the game's main antagonist, the mysterious Red Falcon organization, have introduced a plan to end all humanity as we know it. Therefore, the two aforementioned Earthling Marines turned Contra intend to risk their lives, and to put an immediate end to the Earth's destruction once and for all. Now, the weapons and assist power-ups that both soldiers take advantage of during their lengthy-ass anti-terrorist / extraterrestrial battle are as follows. Aside from the standard default rifle, various weapons include a machine gun, a laser, a flamethrower, and the icing on the cake, the famous fan-fave spread gun. As for the assist power-ups, some of them include rapid fire, a temporary invincibility barrier, and the destructive yet handy anti-Red Falcon smart bomb, available only in one stage. And what do you know, they're all accustomed to match the appropriate style of the player. Exhibit B, Super C. Released 2 years after its predecessor, as well as its original arcade incarnation, namely Super Contra, this next installment offers us the same intense action and difficulty, except it's cranked up yet another notch or two. Just when we thought it'd be all over for Mad Dog and Scorpion, oh hell no, how gravely mistaken we'd be. The Red Falcon's at it again. Aside from the traditional gameplay aspects, new enemies and bosses are introduced, with the addition of altered weapons, and the tip of the old Titanic iceberg. The pseudo-3D stages, which we were offered the last time around, are now replaced with top-view perspective stages, similar to SNK Playmore's Ikari Warrior series. In terms of the altered power-ups and weaponry, everything hasn't changed much so far, except for the laser and the flamethrower design-wise, which in this game has a new feature. After holding down the fire button for a second or two, an even larger burst of fire spews out. Also, new enemies include not only more fierce and ambitious Red Falcon terrorist soldiers and weaponry, there's even more menacing aliens and lifeforms than any fictional race in the Star Trek and Star Wars franchise combined. And they'll stop at jack shit, and I mean absolute jack shit, to make damn sure you don't get far enough. Shifting gears to the all-new top-view areas, namely the enemy base and the aliens lair, stages 2 and 6 respectively, they offer an even greater yet more promising deal of challenge than ever before. The gameplay of this installment, which as always, shouldn't be way too difficult to get used to, it's very spot on as ever, with convincing yet remarkable graphics and yet another unforgettable soundtrack this time around, except it's composed by Miyazawa again, this time by himself. Final exhibit, Contra 3 The Alien Wars. Released for the SNES 2 years later. Once again, just when we thought the Red Falcon carnage would all be over sometime, oh how devastatingly fucking wrong we'd be. The year 2636. The Earth is suffering yet another endlessly reckless extraterrestrial invasion. And it's up to two new grunts to end the chaos. Enter the trigger-happy, war-hungry stylings of Jimbo and Sully. They'll stop at nothing, absolutely fucking nothing, to eradicate the rebellious alien terrorist organization once and for all. As one might expect, the same awesome run-and-gun action of its 8-bit predecessors returns, with the difficulty jacked up to its absolute limits. More menacing enemies and bosses, more weapon and stage concept variety, and more defensive and offensive tactics, unlike any other run-and-gun in the 16-bit era. First things first, the stages. Aside from the usual horizontal scrolling stages, which include some intense, unexpected elements beyond belief, the top few stages are back, with a variety of brand spanking new twists. Using L and R rotates the player for easier navigation between even the deadliest of hazards. Not to mention there's a boss at the end of each and every single one of these stages. The only way to confront them, or at least meet them, is to take out each and every single enemy terminal within the area, while referring to its map via the select button. Now onto the weapons. Aside from the usual machine gun, which in this game's case is the player's default weapon this time around, no more pathetic ass pea shooter rifles like in its predecessors. Not to mention the laser, spread gun, and flamethrower weapons, all of which have underwent well-deserved upgrades, all of which can be fired in 8 directions, as well as in either a unidirectional and or a circular 360-degree pattern in both the side view and top view levels combined. New to the arsenal is a Crusher Nuke weapon that wipes out each enemy upon contact within the blast radius of its fire, and could guarantee, if not fully, more effortless boss battles. Not to mention a homing missile weapon, possible for tracking the enemy's movements, in the style of the Game Boy Contra spin-off Operation C, and is deemed every bit as useful as the Crushers, if not by much. For each player, 2 different weapons can be held throughout each stage. Now bear in mind that one of them will be lost upon death, like the last 2 games. Another godsend is the Smart Bomb, which the soldiers can set off at will, just simply by pushing A, releasing a trippy multicolored energy field, destroying each and every last enemy on screen and or making short work of a boss as possible. However, they should be used in necessary moderation, as they are rather scarce in between each and every stage. If anyone thought that I'd forget about one of the game's most substantial aspects, namely, yep, you guessed it, the difficulty, think again! Cause after attempting countless times to master this installment, you'll be begging to crawl back to the last 2 games in the series. And don't get me started on the Game Boy spin-off, which I covered a few years ago, Operation C, as I've mentioned previously. The Red Falcon does not fuck around. Now let me rephrase that. Every real-life terrorist, cult, and organization in the world has absolutely nothing on the goddamn Red Falcon. Merciless extraterrestrial grunts, snipers, creatures, and droids that attack in the most convenient methods, firing their guns at standstill positions, charging up the soldiers with them, throwing grenades, jumping out of their fucking UFOs, hanging onto helicopter skids with a support chain, and making assaults with a sword, and not to mention bloodthirsty gigaflies. What the fuck? But that's not all, if you could believe that. Oh shit, no. The bosses and sub-bosses will leave you in foreboding, cringe-worthy anxiety. A giant contaminated turtle firing deadly cocoons and 2 types of blast. A humongous, 6-cannon-armed, spider-like metal behemoth with a tail-lasered gun. A fearless, wall-walking, drill-sporting man-o-war orb with 3 forms, one with a rotating plank on both ends, the other which fires missiles during its final transformation, its 3rd and final form releasing spiked ends of the structure while assaulting the soldiers, and the icing on the cake, 2 Terminator-like skeletal cyborgs, one colored blue, the other colored brown, both of which attack on the ground using a machine gun, and jumping and firing a 3-way blast through its pie hole while hanging on the ceiling respectively. followed by a massive, intimidatory, bag-sporting, behemoth-sized parent version of the aforementioned bosses, whose only methods of assault include heat-seeking lasers, a scorching fire breath which travels in a clockwise 720-degree pattern at a set speed depending on the game's difficulty setting, ranging from slow for easy to fast for hard, and finally leaving behind 6 fuse-time bombs to avoid, amongst others. The bombs last only 3 seconds, of course. And what's even more fucked up, there's no extra life code like the last 2 installments. In the Japanese version there's 30 life codes, but not in the American and European versions, oh fuck no. Seriously Konami, what the hell? Maybe I'm just overreacting a smidgen, but I'll definitely give the Alien Wars credibility for applying an exhilarating level of challenge like never before, while staying true to its roots. From where I left off on the basic gameplay, you can aim in all 8 directions. There's also a series of evasive tactics to make valuable use of throughout the game, like flip jumping, ducking, trap timing, and the like. The most common gripes amongst many could be the enemy bullets and stage traps. A player, if those hazards aren't taken directly into consideration, especially in the case of being cautious, could easily be caught off guard the first time. But even after many years, how could one forget the old saying, practice makes perfect? In terms of music and sound, there's some catchy, unforgettable tunes throughout each and every stage, as composed by the combined efforts of Kyohei Sada and Hidenori Maezawa. There's intense sound effects, including explosions, deaths, gunfire, all marvelous to behold, even after 1/4 of a century. It's not too repetitive whatsoever. As for the graphics, they're diminutive yet detailed despite the system's limitations. The environments are well enriched with animated backgrounds and handfuls of projectiles, traps, explosions, enemy and artillery sprites to keep yourself on your toes throughout. And most importantly, the enemy bosses, they're so damn menacing, they even make every slasher film icon and Bond assassin in history look like a class of kindergartners. In addition, the pseudo 3D scaling effects in the base level paths after destroying each wall, in the style of Victor Kai's Golgo 13 series, Sega's Phantasy Star for the SMS, Goonies 2 which Konami also made, not long before, and Friday the 13th by LJN, is what truly makes the first entry shine brighter than even the sun and moon combined. In terms of replayability and fun factor, aside from a few aforementioned notable features, there's that famous code that most, if some, Konami games have. And guess what benefit the code provides us? That's right, 30 lives. 30 fucking lives! You see the buttons that I'm pressing? Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. First introduced in Gradius, released 2 years before, this command has been notorious among gamers for enabling all sorts of cheats and benefits in various other Konami entries, if you will. Life Force, Gyrus, except it's in reverse. Numerous Turtle games including the arcade game, Fall of the Foot Clan, the Manhattan Project, Turtles in Time, even non-Konami games like Kemco's Kid Clown and North and South by Infogrames, as well as Meldak and Life Planning Zombie Nation. Hell, it was even referenced in various other forms of pop culture, most notably Disney's Wreck-It Ralph. Overview aside, I still recommend breezing through it without the code or getting killed at any point throughout the game, because that, my faithful viewers, is where the true Contra challenge lies. Must more be said about the gameplay? It's pretty much the same as before, except the difficulty has been intensified to the very top of the scale, if not already there. In terms of music and sound effects, the sound effects are pretty much the same intense as they were before, but most of the game's soundtrack has been altered, except for the old stage clear fanfare, in which they added a new kick to the piece, using orchestral hits, like most of the game's soundtrack. The graphics entail the same eye-pleasing action and weapon firepower, but with massive improvements, except they are very intense and menacing, not to mention more war-torn environments within every stage, complete with tricky, inclined, yet easy to navigate through surfaces, especially in the 2 aforementioned top few areas. For fun factor and replayability, not to repeat what's already been stated, but yet again, it's the same as its predecessor, aside from attempting as much time as possible to breeze through the game without suffering too many cheap-ass deaths and or relying on the code. The usual, if somewhat improved upon, two-player co-ops is where this installment really shines. For gameplay, it's flawless in every classic sense of the word, never tedious in any form depending on the player's skill. If special care and tactics aren't exercised well enough throughout the course of the game, especially in hard mode, which is the only way to see a true ending, expect countless mind suffering and detestable accidental deaths. In terms of music and sound, composed by the indestructible trio of Miki Higashino, Masanori Adachi, and Tabi Iwase, there are tracks featured for each stage mood, ranging from the futuristic, adrenaline-rushing, carnage-filled Neo City to the Red Falcon trek in stages 1 through 5, to the fear-inducing boss and stage 6 themes. Also, the sound effects, mostly in terms of explosions and weapon fire, not to mention the death cry of Jimbo and Sully when either one of them gets his ass handed back to him in a saucer, are competent enough, even to evade the accidental ear rape factor. As far as graphics go, there's well-enriched and exquisite 16-bit detail in every stage, not to mention the menacing bosses, elaborate backgrounds, and unexpected and inclining traps and hazards throughout. For fun factor and replayability, need I repeat myself any further? Beating the game in either easier and or normal mode provides a motivational message to tackle it yet again in the hardest possible difficulty setting. Despite how monotonous it might become, this method is more of a way to memorize each and every single pattern and hazard that the player might have failed royally and miserably upon in previous attempts. Final verdict on the Contra series: while I don't recommend the Alien Wars and or Hardcore on Genesis released 2 years later very highly, I still believe the first two entries are boss. Contra and Super C for the NES are also available on the PC via the Konami Collector Series alongside the Castlevania trilogy, the Wii Virtual Console, and its hidden bonuses in Contra 4 for the DS. Therefore, if you're in the mood for some good old-fashioned trigger-finger run-and-gun action, I strongly suggest picking these babies up. The only Contra games I strongly advise staying away from, mostly due to one or more of the following cases: not having anything to do with the main concept of the franchise, or abysmal gameplay controls and third-rate graphics, whatever the case might be. Contra Force, the Game Boy Advance remake of Contra: The Alien Wars. Trust me, you're better off with the Game Boy version. Contra Legacy of War and See the Contra Adventure, both for the PS1 and 96, also released for the Saturn and 98 respectively. And finally, Neo Contra. With that being said, until then, this is the Hardcore Retro God signing off.